Hola, muy buenas noches. Les damos la más cordial bienvenida al segundo Festival de Música Leni Alexander, el tercer encuentro de mujeres en la música Chile, organizado por el colectivo Resonancia Femenina. El día de hoy me acompañan las compositoras chilenas Catherine Bachmann, María Carolina López y Fernanda Carrasco, y nuestra invitada internacional, Carla Lucero. Nuestro festival estará siendo transmitido durante toda la semana por Face Live y la programación la puede encontrar en nuestras redes sociales, Instagram, Facebook, y también estará disponible en nuestra página web www.resonanciafemenina.com. Tendremos durante toda esta semana conversatorios con compositoras chilenas, directoras chilenas. También nos van a acompañar la compositora Melissa Vargas de Colombia, el Foro Argentino de Compositoras, tendremos conciertos con música latinoamericana hecha por mujeres y también tendremos estrenos con la Orquesta de Mujeres bajo la dirección de Ninoska Medel y el reestreno del ciclo de canto y piano de la compositora Leni Alexander y también la entrega del premio Añañuca. Así que quedan cordialmente invitados e invitadas para que puedan seguir nuestras transmisiones y todo lo que es nuestro festival. Dejo ahora con ustedes a mi colega Catherine Bachmann.
Hola, hoy tenemos una gran invitada para inaugurar este festival. Tenemos a la compositora norteamericana Carla Lucero. Vamos a ver un poco de su biografía. Ella es originaria de Los Ángeles, estudió en el California Institute of the Arts y su obra ha sido interpretada internacionalmente en muchos países, en México, en Chile, Cuba, Canadá, Alemania, España e Italia. Ha recibido muchos premios internacionales y ha compuesto dos óperas, Wornos, que es sobre la vida de Aileen Wuornos, que es la primera asesina en serie femenina de Estados Unidos, y su segunda ópera, que fue estrenada el año pasado, Juana, una ópera de cámara en español sobre la ícono feminista Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, que también tendrá estrenos próximamente en los próximos años. Y actualmente está componiendo una tercera ópera que se llama Touch, que trata sobre la escritora y la activista por la justicia social, que es ciega y sorda, Helen Keller. Tiene muchos trabajos en proceso, como un ballet, una pieza de baile también. Y bueno, ahora voy a contarle un poco a Carla lo que hemos estado hablando. Es muy difícil resumir su biografía. Carla, I'm talking to the people, all your biography, it's incredible. Your work is incredible. You never stop. I tried to synthesize your biography so that our viewers have an idea of the tremendous composer and person you are. Now I leave you with Fernanda to start the interview.
So, Carla, first of all, we're very happy to have you here in the festival. I don't know if you want to say something before we start with the interview.
Yes, I would love to. Thank all of you for this opportunity. It's so wonderful that you were able to be with us in Los Angeles for the premiere of Juana. And it's so wonderful to see you again. And I'm honored that you are interviewing me and that Juana is the inaugural project for the Leni Alexander Festival. So muchas gracias a todas.
Gracias a ti también. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about your work and let's talk about Sor Juana opera. Why did you choose Sor Juana as the subject of your opera?
Well, I was first introduced to Sor Juana through a women's studies course in college. And I was surprised that I hadn't heard about her before that, you know, especially because the United States borders Mexico. There's many Mexican Americans in the United States, especially in California. So I was surprised that I hadn't heard of her. Also, she's considered the first great poet of the Americas. She is the proto-feminist the Western Hemisphere, you know, having lived in the 1700s or the 1600s, 17th century. So I was really surprised that I hadn't heard about her. So the more I became obsessed with her story, and through the years, I collected books, volumes of her poetry, books about Sor Juana, but I always felt there was something missing in the story. There were, you know, of course, people who wrote about her talked a lot about her feminism, and other, you know, there were other writers that thought she was this amazingly holy nun, and that was completely out of the question from everything else I had learned about her. So the further I dug into her story, the more I was revealed, and I came across some correspondence that she had with the Virena, La Condesa de Paredes, and it was romantic, it was erotic, and, you know, it was written to another woman. So that blew my mind, and I thought, okay, that is what has been missing here. I didn't have like a complete picture of her before, and I thought this gives so much more depth to her character, explains so much more about her, you know, as a person, and explained a lot also the reason why she went into the convent. So she went into the convent because she wanted to avoid getting married, and she wrote about that throughout her life. And she also wanted a space to be able to write, to continue writing. So she was completely self-taught. Girls were not allowed to go to school past elementary school. So she used to, even at 3 years old, accompany her sister, her older sister, to school. But then that had to stop because her sister couldn't go anymore. So she asked her mother to dress her as a boy so that she could attend school. And of course, her mother refused. But luckily for Sor Juana, her grandfather had this extensive library, books from all over the world, books of antiquity, and then also some pretty progressive books like Plato's Symposium. So she really had a very broad base of education through books. She was largely self-taught. So that in and of itself made me really so much more interested in her as a person. I knew of her works, I knew of her genius, but I started to kind of fill in the blanks of who she was. But in terms of weaving a story together, I felt like I needed a source material to base the opera on, especially because there's so much historical detail that, you know, as a composer, I didn't have the time to become a scholar of Sor Juana. And I don't, you know, I'm kind of a writer, but I'm not, you know, that's not my deal. I came across a book in San Francisco called Sor Juana's Second Dream, and it's by Alicia Gaspar de Alba. And I freaked out. I read the book. It's almost a 500-page book. I read it in one weekend. I devoured the book, couldn't put it down. I closed the book, picked up the phone, found Alicia, and I asked her right then. I told her, I just finished your book. I read it cover to cover in a weekend, and this has to be the source material for my opera. Please say yes. And she said yes. And she also said, I will co-write the libretto with you if that's what you want. I said, of course, because I mean, I just read her writing and I thought, my God, this would be amazing, you know, to be able to do this. So that is why I chose Sor Juana. Also, I was raised Catholic, and I was aware of so much of the hypocrisy in the church, and you know, I could go on and on about that, but it was so, I was so struck by Sor Juana's courage. She had such courage to be able to stand up against the patriarchy of the church and then of the times. and also what is still true, I think, about Sor Juana's story, what's true for all of us women, writers, composers, artists in general, we always have to constantly prove ourselves over and over and over again. And Sor Juana had to do that from very early age. There was one part of her life that really struck me. And it was very sad, but I think it was so sad mainly because it resonated with me. She she became kind of a darling of the court, of the royal court in Nueva España, which was Mexico at that time. I mean, now it's Mexico, but it was Nueva España then. So the court took her in when she was a teenager, and at 16 years old, they were so dazzled by her genius that they said, we're going to bring in 40 scholars, professors, scientists, writers, and we're going to put them in front of you, and they're just going to fire off questions to you, and we want to see if you're as smart as you say you are. Can you imagine that pressure on a 16-year-old girl? So she spent months, and I think about 3 months, trying to understand the questions that could be asked. She wasn't given the questions to begin with, so she read as much as she could in those 3 months. So that was just, for me, it was just awful. But I don't think much has changed. We as women, we don't go into any situations with our art where there's any presumption that it's going to be great, right? It's more like, let's see what you can do, right? I remember also thinking about this when I was writing my first opera, Warnos. I was asked right away, you are told you don't look like an opera composer. You don't look like an opera composer. So I thought, oh, great, what am I supposed to do? I've got the hair, but it's like, what else do you want? So, and then one time during that whole process of fundraising and concerts to get to be able to do the premiere, I was introduced as the little brown one, which was so insulting. I was so offended, so it was more like, look at what this little one can do, or this little brown one can do. So for me, that has always been something that I carry. Things have gotten better, but I don't think to the point where we don't have to prove ourselves over and over again. So back to Sor Juana, I was really, really intrigued with her relationship with La Condesa de Paredes, and Alicia really fleshed that out in her book. It was really beautiful, and really realized the whole love affair was realized in a very poetic way. Yeah, but the thing is that nobody can ever prove that they consummated their relationship. So, but in Alicia's book, she did. And that's that idea of Sor Juana's second dream, because the first dream, Primero Sueño, is this metaphysical, grand poem. But her second dream, Alicia was thinking of what her dream would be in the flesh, if she could have her dream. So yeah, I was infatuated with Sor Juana, and had the utmost respect for her, and related to her a lot of the things that she had to go through. So that is why I chose her as a subject.
So definitely it was a very interesting life with a lot of beautiful details, and an example to all of us that we are still fighting for equality and rights now.
That's right. That is right.
So about the opera, which technical aspect did you staging of the opera involve?
Oh man, it was crazy. It was a very large production, even though it was a chamber opera. Um, there were so many different moving parts. So I live close to San Francisco. I'm in Napa, California, and that's in Northern California. The opera premiered in Los Angeles, so that is so it's hundreds of miles away. So the way that we did this, Alicia lives in Los Angeles also, so we wrote remotely, and then we would get together. Even part of it was written in Texas. We ended up there for a little while, so we were writing this all over the place. And but what was really interesting is that I don't feel like it really started to come together until we knew that it was picked up for production. So then we're like, oh wow, we better we better really finish this. So they brought in a dramaturg, Mark Campbell, who's a very famous librettist, and he helped us to kind of finish, to hone it, to polish it into what it became. Meanwhile, I had written, because it took years and years and years to get the opera finished, a large part because we put it aside for a little while when it didn't get picked up for production. We wanted to wait to resume working on it afterwards, after we knew. So what happened is when it got picked up, I continued to write music up here in San Francisco, and the team in Los Angeles, Opera UCLA, they casted the whole opera. So I hadn't even met the cast. I had no idea who was singing any of the parts, but I would get these reviews, and sometimes I would hear from the singers saying, "Oh, could you I can't hit this note," or "I can hit this note. Can I hit this?" I thought, oh my God, of course. So it was wonderful because I was able to have this exchange with the singers, but again, from far away. So then when I started, and then we had a workshop production in Los Angeles, and I got to hear the singers and meet them. And they did a very nice favor for me. They had two casts. So there were two workshop productions. So I was able to kind of choose between the two casts. I didn't have the ultimate power of decision, but they wanted me to weigh in as to which cast I liked better. So I chose the cast with the director Peter Cazares, the director of Opera UCLA, and Mary Chun, who's a longtime collaborator of mine. She's a conductor. So after that part was done, I came back here to San Francisco and started orchestrating. So this opera has instruments that are way out of the range of just a normal orchestration for chamber music, or for symphonic music. For instance, I have a vihuela, I have the recorder, I have indigenous instruments from Mexico, pre-Columbian instruments. So I really had to do a lot of research about these instruments. So I hired a project manager for the score, and he helped because we hired a vihuelas from Spain, and he was able to correspond with him to make sure that the tablature was correct, and which it's really different than anything you've seen. It's those diamond-shaped note heads and with numbers and it's weird stuff, right? So we had to make sure that that was correct. And then we went through so many people trying to find the instruments, the indigenous instruments of Mexico, and that was really difficult. We finally found the instruments I wanted. I was very insistent. I need these instruments. People were saying, "No, you could put a skin over a La Mancha tom, and it will sound like a huehuetel." And I was like, "No, let's get a huehuetel and ayoyotes and all the other instruments I wanted to use." So I was kind of a pain in the butt, in that way, because I insisted on all of these things. But I wanted it to sound authentic to the time and the place, as much as possible. So while they were designing the costumes, designing the sets over there, the singers working with vocal coaches and diction coaches, because only a few of them spoke Spanish. So they wanted to, every time they would sing it, it would sound like it was Italian. And I was like, no, it's not Italian, it's Espanol. So they brought in some really great diction coaches. So that was going on while I was orchestrating. So finally, when the orchestration was done, then they hired the players at Opera UCLA, and I had to make sure that we could get Pedro Jesus Gomez, the vihuelist from Spain. So everything was crazy. It was like this whirling thing happening. So then the next time I was in Los Angeles, it was during production week. And I walked into the theater and I was like, oh, because I hadn't seen the set. I hadn't seen the costumes. I hadn't seen all of that, and I cried. I hadn't heard the instruments, all of the instruments, like the harpsichord was another one. I'd never written for the harpsichord before. So it was amazing, and I could not have done this without that whole team. Also, we brought in a director kind of late in the process, Sarah Widzer, and she was amazing. So it was an all-girl team, myself, Alicia, Mary Chun, and Sarah Widzer, and then the costume and set designers, Alexa and Maddie, women. So it was a whole woman team, and it did not start out that way, but it ended up that way. So we're very happy about that.
Nice. So there's a huge job there. My admiration for you and the team for the beautiful work and production there.
Thank you. It was fun too.
I imagine so. And which reference did you have to compose this opera?
Well, it was interesting because the music travels through time, time and place, and some of it there's not a time and place, like El Alma, right, is a disembodied spirit. So my whole idea was, it was interesting because I started off studying a lot about indigenous instruments, pre-Columbian instruments of Mexico. That's where I started. And then I kind of moved chronologically. Then I moved to Mexican and Spanish Baroque music to really get the rhythms, because the rhythms are really complex. I started to write in 12, I think it was 12/8. I was writing in, and then I had to break it down to like 6/8, 3/4, 6/8, 3/4. Like it was this weird thing that I had to do to adjust it, to make it playable, because the regular symphonic musicians were kind of like, where are the accents? What are we supposed to do? Well, the accents are there. Well, we don't get it unless it's, cut it up for us. So that was one thing, an alteration I had to make, it, more true rhythmically to what we know now. So Murcia, Santiago de Murcia, was a huge composer that I studied. It was a composer during the 17th century, during Sor Juana's time, and in Spain. But it was interesting because when I was listening to the Mexican Baroque music, there was definitely kind of a link, because Mexico was kind of behind time-wise. Instead of like what Spain was doing, Spain had moved on, right? They were already kind of embracing this idea of a bigger ensembles, and kind of moving away from strictly Baroque music. So, but Mexico and all of Latin America, they were starting to really embrace this, and Murcia was kind of late in as a Baroque Spanish Baroque composer. So I heard similarities. I really loved his work. Another it was kind of funny because while I was writing this, orchestrating and composing it, somebody told me, and I have so much respect for this person, but I was thinking, what? They said that my music reminded them of Poulenc. And I thought, that's really weird. Like I don't understand that. I don't know where that came from. But my major influences are Stravinsky, Granados, Puccini, of course. Like I have to get an opera singer in there. I'm trying to think. I wrote down one more because I wanted to mention this. Strauss, God, Richard Strauss. Love Strauss because the harmonies, as you guys could probably tell, I love this idea of shifting harmonies while somebody's singing. And I just told somebody about this. They asked why I love Strauss so much. To me, Strauss is like standing in a creek, right? And the water is rushing through your legs, right? Like you feel the water rushing. And for me, that's kind of like the harmonies, while the singer is in the same place. So I really kind of wanted to find to embrace that type of feeling because the music has to travel from Baroque to sacred music, right? Sacred music to this dream state with El Alma. So I kind of think that it's like putting all these composers' ideas in a blender, but it comes out as Carla Lucero, right? So it's kind of this weird thing, and I'm in that. I'm so in like when I hear it again, I think, okay, I am completely doing the El Alma stuff. That's me, and a lot of the love duets and the arias are definitely something that kind of came more from a visceral point rather than a point of some kind of reference. So you guys saw it. Do you agree with those references?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Yes.
Not Poulenc, though.
I think it's Stravinsky, maybe.
Yeah, Stravinsky from an early age. I love Stravinsky.
Nice. And Carla, beyond Sor Juana, what motivated you to compose opera? I mean, as a musical genre.
Oh, wow. Well, both of my parents love opera. So I was introduced to it as a baby. And I would sit in my pajamas, and listen to Don Giovanni, and just love it. I love the way that the music was telling a story. Of course, I wasn't realizing this at the time, but, I loved that it was telling a story, even though I couldn't understand the language. And do you remember those opera albums, like the big albums, and they'd be really thick, and the libretto would be in there, and pictures of the characters and all that. So my dad had that, and I would pull those out. I'm sure my dad hated that I did this, but I would color those pictures as I was listening because I was trying to change the characters as I heard their voices and all of that. So I loved opera from being a baby, I would say. I also loved the Beatles at that time too. So it's kind of, yeah, it's the kind of combination. But I also wanted to say, my dad really loved opera, but my mom had a different connection to it because she grew up in India, and across the street from her was an opera singer, a pretty famous opera singer, and she would listen to her practice all the time and just sit on the steps and just be swept away listening to her. She was a soprano, so her name was Cecilia Batista, and Cecilia would take my mom to the opera, let her go for free and listen. And my mom has such a connection with it. So when I told my parents that I wanted to compose opera, they said, "Of course you want to compose opera. you know, of course. So yeah, but I actually started off as a piano major, which is weird because I don't performing. If I'm performing by myself, I can't stand it. I get too nervous. I mean, it was fun. It's fine, like to perform with different people, but by myself, like as a solo pianist, it was too much for me. And you know, as a child, I would always write music, not knowing what I was really doing. And that goes actually back to the whole idea of being um, female, because I was technically trained as a pianist to become a concert pianist, right? I was technically trained to do that, but um, I wasn't taught enough theory. You know, I wasn't taught anything about writing music or all of that. So it was more like technical training. So when I went to college, you know, I knew I was not going to stay a piano major. That was just my vehicle to get into college. And then I changed my major to composition. Um, so yeah, I knew that I wanted to write opera, but I waited for a long time because I knew that it would be a huge commitment. So for me, my subjects come to me. I don't look for material. They come to me. In fact, I have so many people behind me in line waiting for their operas, you know, like all these different subjects, you know, it's like in history, because I love biographical stories about women. That's my thing. So you know, they have to be strong women. They have to they there's definitely some type of challenges that they end up, you know, overcoming. Um, so yeah, they, like I said, they find me. The way I wrote my first opera actually is I used to own a recording studio in Los Angeles, and this studio was just crazy. It was really did not end well, but it was, you know, rap, like we were recording Ice Cube and Coolio and, you know, all of these rap guys. And I was like, oh my God, I have to get out of here. This is not my thing. You know, I loved having the studio to record, but, you know, I thought I just really kind of need to, I'm missing my artistic self, you know, in this. So, and at that time I was doing film composition, composition for film and for dance productions, and also producing commercial artists. I was doing that quite a bit. So I was kind of living that Hollywood life. And we had a subscription to Vanity Fair magazine. And you know, we would get it every month. And I opened it up and I was reading, and there was a story that said it was hooker with a heart of gold. And that means a prostitute with a, you know, big heart. And I thought, what the heck is this? So I was reading it. It was about Eileen Wuornos. So again, I'm so spontaneous and crazy when something hits me. I said, you know what? I'm out of here. I sold all my stuff and I left the business and went to stay with my parents in Mexico, in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. And I said, I need a year to get this opera, you know, get material for it so I can shop it. So I took a big risk, but I knew that that's really what I wanted to do. And I knew I'd been waiting, you know, for a subject to come along, and I couldn't resist. I knew that her story had all of the elements of tragic opera, and it was big. I mean, it's grand opera. It's not a chamber opera. So yeah, that was my that is what actually was the catalyst, Eileen Wuornos, for my first opera, and just being kind of unhappy with the way that my life was at that time. So I went and I lived in Mexico for a year, and that's also when I started to know more and more about Sor Juana. I was like, wow, okay, I got the, she's going to be the next one, you know. But yeah, so that's how it happened.
Very nice story, Carla. You're a strong woman too. I have to say that.
And crazy.
And crazy. That's your secret. And Beatles and the
It's got to be. It's got to be. There's got to be a little bit of smart, a little bit of strong, and a lot of crazy, right?
Okay, so And how do you approach the interdisciplinary work?
Oh, well, that is, I would like to say that comes naturally, but it doesn't. I am very strong-willed, and I have strong opinions about my work or what I want to do. And I usually see the work that I want to do like in its entirety. I see the full picture, not the details, but the full picture. So what I like to do is, as I'm going on the journey to develop a project, a large project, I start to choose the people I want to work with. So the first element, of course, they have to be talented. But if they're just talented, but they are not easy to work with, they're gone, because that type of relationship that you have with a collaborator is like a marriage, because it takes so long, you spend so much time with them, so you have to, hopefully love that person, as a person. Um, so that's the first thing, going along the journey. And then, as you start to develop a project, you see that the needs of that project start to change a little bit. And with a really good collaborator, you have to trust them and trust their vision. And so your filter becomes less because you trust them. At first, you're like, okay, let's see this. And you're just like, like shaking, like, oh my God, what are they going to do to my idea? But as you get to know them and work with them more, it's a give and take, right? So if I trust who I'm working with, then it's like it makes it really easy. And then as I go along, usually the people that are associated with the production aspect of it, I like to bring them in early so that they get an idea of what these first ideas are, in terms of development, because I never want to lose what that spark was, that initial spark. Even working with a collaborator, it's like, okay, this is my original idea. And if that's not there in the end result, that means either I gave up or I lost interest. That it's not, because that spark needs to be there. It's like falling in love, that spark has to be there in order for it to be real, right? So that's a big part of it. Then I was also going to say that that with some collaborators, if I am brought in, let's say, instead of me starting saying, oh, I'm going to start this project and bring somebody in. If it's the other way around, if they're bringing me in, then it's different, right? So then at that point, I'm usually kind of looking at them like, okay, so what do you want to do with this, right? What is your big idea in the end? So they usually also, they have the kind of the big idea. And so then we actually end up, and usually I'm usually the one to do this if I'm brought into a project. Like I want to make a timeline, right? So with goals, right? So we're going to finish this at this point, and at this point we're going to do this. So then, and then you just kind of say, like, you're going to be responsible for this part of it, and I'll be responsible for this, and then we're going to meet and see what works, what doesn't. So I'm probably a lot nicer to work with if I'm hired than if it's my project, because when you have a project, that first idea is your baby, right? That's your baby, and you want to make sure that people are taking care of your baby. But if it's somebody else's baby, fine, I'll co-parent, but I'm not going to make the decisions. I'm not going to spank the baby. I'm not going to decide which church the baby goes to. That's the main collaborator's idea. I just want to try to help, with the project.
Thank you, Carla. Your words and your histories are very motivating to continue in art, at least for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Carla, my dear and beautiful Carla, we are reaching the end of the interview, but before that, why don't you tell us about your current opera and other works in progress, maybe some concerts and events
Sure.
that you have planned for 2021 or and beyond?
Sure. Well, just in chronological order, in right at the early part of, we're not sure if it's going to be January or February, but two pieces that I did, I made piano reductions of some of the pieces in Warnos, my first opera, and it's going to be performed at Carnegie Hall in New York. So that's like a big deal for me. I mean, I can't even believe it's happening. And they're going to, thank you, Catherine. I see Catherine. They're going to record it, and it's going to be commercially released. So that's the first thing in 2021. Right before that, though, I have a ballet that's premiering, House of Names. So that's gonna happen too, and that's with an amazing choreographer, Marika Bressel, and that's going to be in San Francisco. So Carnegie Hall, that's New York. Then I have a show in London for the London Festival of American Music. Odaline Martinez asked me to take part in it, and I have the utmost respect for her. She's an amazing conductor and composer. So she puts on this festival, so I'm excited about that. My main thing, though, is my third opera, Touch, and it's about Helen Keller. And I am co-writing the libretto now with my co-librettist. Her name is Mariana Mott Newworth, and she's in New York. So it's one of those remote situations again, and we meet every week to discuss our work on the libretto, and we work through Zoom, and we're getting it a lot done. So we're excited about that. So the producer is Opera Birmingham, and that's in the state of Alabama. So that's in the southern United States. One of the reasons why that's a really good fit is that Helen Keller grew up in Alabama. So there's that connection, and we have another company in New York and possibly in Pittsburgh that will kind of join in, and maybe one in California. But I wanted to say that the story of Helen Keller is so motivating because she was blind and deaf. And I don't know if you guys have seen the movie The Miracle Worker. It was about when she was a child and blind and deaf. So this opera, Touch, starts well beyond that. So it deals with her being a political activist, a writer, and then also falling in love with one of her interpreters. So it's crazy, and so it's like really, it's very deep personally. It's a great story. We're really excited about it. What I forgot to say is Juana is going to have its East Coast premiere in August 2021. So that's also happening. We're not sure at this point, with the pandemic, if it's going to be a live production or filmed. So at this point, they're discussing both with Alicia and I, and so we'll just see that the singers. It's been cast. It was supposed to be in August of 2020, a couple months ago, but that couldn't happen. So the singers are ready. They're ready, and we have everybody else there, and that's going to be by Del Arte Opera Ensemble in New York. Yeah.
Nice. You never stop, Carla.
Well, I can't.
What a woman. I will love to see all of that.
I would love you to see all of it, all of you. Maybe we should do this again, and you guys come to the United States and see what's going on, or we can meet in London.
Oh, we will love that.
That'd be great.
Yes, that would be great. So, Carla, maybe you can tell us where the audience can find your work and listen some of your music.
I have a website. Do you want me to put it in the chat? or tell you.
Yes.
It's easy. It's carlalucero.com.
Oh, okay. We're going to write that.
Really difficult. So yeah.
To remind. So you're going to look at that right now.
Okay.
So thank you, Carla, for this beautiful and interesting interview.
Thank you
for being here. Do you want to say something before we go to show your work?
Yes, again, thank you, all of you. I'm honored to be a part of this festival, and I mean, even more honored to be the inaugural, I guess, composer and the project. I'm beyond honored. Just really happy. Thank you for everything, and also your friendship.
Thank you. We are honored to have you here too. Thank you very much. Ya pasar al siguiente punto, dejamos a Carolina López. Carolina, ¿estás por ahí?
Hola a todos. Bueno, después de esta excelente y entretenida entrevista, les dejamos invitados a todos y a todas a las actividades de este tercer encuentro de mujeres en la música y segundo Festival Leni Alexander, convocado por el colectivo Resonancia Femenina, actividades que se estarán desarrollando esta semana cada día a las 20 horas y que se podrán ver a través del Facebook de Resonancia Femenina y también a través del canal de YouTube de Resonancia Femenina. Les dejo entonces con un extracto seleccionado por la propia compositora de la ópera Juana de Carla Lucero.
Tan Posiblemente no estáis familiarizada con este texto, ya que la Inquisición lo ha prohibido hace ya un tiempo. Estimados colegas, caballeros y damas de la corte, y por supuesto vuestras excelencias, estoy simplemente probando la amplitud del conocimiento de esta brillante joven dama. ¿Puedo proceder? Como iba diciendo, este texto ha sido prohibido hace muchos años, pero una estudiosa de su índole seguramente debió haberlo leído. ¿Podéis vos hablar los tres géneros descritos por Aristóteles en el Simposio de Platón?
Cuánta verdad.
Pues bien, Juana, ¿cómo es que los hombres causan la caída de las mujeres y no a la inversa?
Ellos van a la cama con María Magdalena. Quieren acercarse a la Virgen María, denigrando a la Virgen María.
Esto ha de ser reportado.
Sor Rafaela, ¿no sabes si yo bailo? Oh, si no Sor Rafaela se ha de haber pasado justo al otro lado de la puerta.
Posiblemente vos podéis desarrollar algunos ejercicios para mejorar su coordinación, Juana.
Un dispositivo para mejorar su oído.
Os pido disculpas, ilustrísima, haré azotar a esa muchacha por venir aquí. Ella no habrá manoseada. Esta comida con sus sucios dedos. Espero, espero, espero ilustrissima, yo mismo he preparado la comida. Ambos sabemos cuánto aborrecéis el sexo femenino. Hablando del sexo femenino, Antonio, habéis hablado con Sor Juana últimamente. He escuchado rumores que la condesa de Paredes está planeando publicar sus garabatos en España. Vos sabéis, don Manuel, que ella me ha despedido como su padre confesor. No tengo razón alguna para hablar con ella.
sexo y vuestra vocación.
Pues hija grande de la iglesia, a vuestro año de prueba.
Debéis firmar nuevamente vuestro testimonio de fe, Sor Juana. Defensa de las verdades que la peor del
Yo lo tengo este genio. Si es malo, yo no me lo hice. Nací con él y con él he de morir.